The following video in its entirety is without prejudice. Greetings everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you about WorkSafe New Brunswick and how they're unconstitutionally withholding money from injured workers in New Brunswick. I'll explain what they do and how they do this, and then I'll back everything that I have to say with fact. Basically, if you've been off work or if you've been injured at work and you've been off longer than 12 weeks and you're a seasonal worker, at that 12-week mark, they go back prior to your injury up to 36 months. Average that and pay you 85% of that instead of 85% of what you were making when you were injured, which is what the law says. This is their policy that they use. You can see where it says average earnings, the definition. This is from the Act. And as you scroll down through the policy, it comes to this point, where now they've given themselves the ability to go back over 36 months. The Workers' Compensation Act. Actually, I'll start with my letter. I wrote them a letter just over a year ago that they've yet to reply to. I don't expect a reply, because if they were going to, they would have by now. I've written them other letters and they've replied to those other letters. They just haven't touched this one. I'll scroll down through as I talk about it so everybody gets a chance to read it. But basically, I tell them that their policy is illegal, and actually their policy is very unconstitutional, and I'm going to get into that. But during this time, I didn't mention the constitutionality of, or the unconstitutionality of the law or the policy. This would just, you cannot substitute policy for law. It's illegal. If you are a government entity and you substitute policy for law and you add things to the policy that's not in the legislation, now you're legislating. And not being a legislative body, that's illegal. So as I scroll down through, you can see pre-accident earnings. This is right from the Workers' Act. And there's case law. Fucker versus WorkSafe New Brunswick in 2010, Queen Court of Appeal here in New Brunswick. And the judge says of how we're to be paid. So they're not to pay us any other way but 85% of what we were making when we were injured. Now, they're treating us this way, saying that that's the policy. You'll hear that a lot from WorkSafe. That's the policy. Well, we have the right to be treated under the law. Policy doesn't matter. Policy is irrelevant. In mistreating us, in deciding to use their fraudulent policy, they're committing criminal negligence. Criminal negligence is a crime under the Canada Criminal Code. This was my case manager that I had, and this was his boss, or is his boss, the director, Pauline Roy. And I've spoken with both of them, and they both hide behind this policy. Well, as an individual, you have to worry about certain things in life, whether or not you're going to have food tomorrow, a roof over your head, shelter, the necessities of life. I myself have to worry about whether or not I'm going to be able to meet my bills, if I'm going to be able to pay for the things that I have in life, because when you're injured, you don't count on getting injured. So your bills are set up in such a way that most people have to be working in order to be able to afford their life. Well, 85%, you can still do it. You might struggle, but when they take this on top of that, they really make it tough for people. The bottom line is that they're breaking the law, they're breaking the criminal code, and playing with people's heads, and showing wanton and reckless disregard for our mental safety. Now, I told them I didn't want to go about this route. All I'm asking for is to be treated fairly under the law and to be paid properly. And I told them that I would go to the media as well. And I have. I'm going to get into that. I've given this letter to CBC, and I'll touch on that later. But first I want to go over some other things. Go back to my browser here and just go to the top. All right. So this is their policy that allows them to go back, or they use to go back, that 36-month period. And they ask you when you're injured if you were a seasonal worker, so they know whether or not to apply this policy, because this policy isn't applied to everybody. No, they decide when and where they want to apply their policies, which is part of the injustice that's going on. This is the law, the Compensation Act here in New Brunswick. And you probably, well, you may recognize some of this from my letter because I did quote it. This is the section that says how we are to be paid. 38.1. Average earnings, this was in their policy, right from the Act. Pre-accident earnings, this is the one that really matters. Pre-accident earnings means the daily, weekly, monthly, or regular remuneration that the worker was receiving at the time of the injury or reoccurrence of the injury, which, as may appear to be to the Commission, best to represent the earnings of the worker. So basically, the way I understand that is if you're working and you're injured, you get what you were, 85% of what you were making when you were working. Nowhere here does it say anything about 12 weeks or 36 months or 12 months before. There's nothing that says that they get to go back. This is something that they've added to their policy, and they're treating it as law. Now, it's unconstitutional. And the reason why is because in Canada, we have the right, not only to freedom of speech, love our country, but we have the right to be treated equally under the law. Every individual is equal before the and under the law and has the right to the equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination, and in particular without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability. Well, myself and other injured workers most likely have, well, I know I do, but other workers most likely would have a physical disability. I have one. I'm home, chronic pain, not able to work. Well, they're saying because our physical disability went beyond a 12-week period that now they're going to treat us differently under the law, and that is unconstitutional. Just think about that for a moment. Here we have a government entity, a crown corporation, and being in Canada, the government is of the crown. The Queen is our head of state. And everything that they do when dealing with you is in Her Majesty's name. And there's people out there that'll say that the Queen doesn't have any power in Canada, that she's just a figurehead. Well, they're wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. And here's the proof. This is CanadianCrown.gc.ca. It explains how, pardon the ad, it explains how Her Majesty is our Queen. She's our head of state. It's no different than if we had a castle here on our land and she sat here and ruled us. Sure, we rule ourselves under government and under the rule of law. However, she is the be-all and end-all, and it's royal assent that goes onto the law last before it's passed. The Governor General has the ability to do this in place of the Queen, so the Queen is the be-all and end-all. Now, we have the ability to contact Her Majesty. Elizabeth May, leader of the Green Party. During the last federal election, there was a scandal called robocall, where, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not, but I'll just give it a little bit on it. Basically, voters were called the day before and told the polling stations moved. Well, Elizabeth May wrote the Queen. In her letters on the internet, you can find it. She is leader of the Green Party, but she wrote the Queen as a subject, asking the Queen for a royal inquiry into robocall to restore democracy, or the faith in democracy in Canada. Well, you and I, as individuals, as subjects of Her Majesty, have the ability and the privilege to be able to write the Queen. You can go to the British Monarchy website, and there's a form for writing Her Majesty, and what you have to, basically how you have to word your greeting and your ending, and then the middle would be yours. And she may or may not reply, depending on what it is. I'm sure she doesn't reply to simple stuff. Now, if you were an investment banker and you were stealing money, they would come in to your bank and arrest you. If you were a CEO in a company and you were skimming money off the top, or you were cheating the public fraudulently, then they would prosecute you and you would be before a criminal court. Well, this is no different. These people are stealing from us. They're doing so unconstitutionally, and it needs to stop. And as a Canadian citizen, I'm demanding equal treatment under the law in a number of respects. The first respect is I demand equal treatment under the law, that I be paid 85% of what I was making at the time that I was injured, rather than 85% of their average that they've used to only pad their pocketbook. Last spring, WorksafeNB New Brunswick was found guilty of withholding people's money from their Canada pension plans. What they were doing was they were going, if you were receiving Canada pension and you were getting benefits from WorkSafe, but you weren't 65 yet, they were taking dollar for dollar off of what you would get from your Canada pension off of your benefits. And they've been ordered to pay back all that money that they've been taking from people under their illegal policy. This has gone through the courts here in New Brunswick last spring. Tom Barron is the labor specialist who was ahead of it, and you can hear his interview on CBC on their website. And the link is right here. I'll put it in the video as well. But basically, they have to pay back $4 million, and he says that their policies are unjust and are illegal. So this is a policy that's been already thrown out by the courts, and they've already been caught stealing. They're stealing more from us now under this policy, or they were stealing in tandem with, and now they've stopped stealing Canada pension. Now we need them to stop stealing benefits from people that have been injured longer than 12 weeks. I'm not going to get into this any further right now, but you can go to this site and look this over and listen to what they have to say. Basically, WorkSafe was caught dead in the wrong. I am demanding that law enforcement investigate WorkSafe New Brunswick, right down to the finest level, each case, because there's multiple cases out there of criminal negligence in WorkSafe, and that's coming. That'll be another video to follow. But basically, we need to have justice. The people need justice. Justice is as justice does. If you let this go on, and you let the tyrannical system that's in place steal from the public, break our Constitution in Her Majesty's name, then you might as well tear up our Constitution. So I'm demanding that there be an investigation into WorkSafe New Brunswick by our Crown prosecutors and the police, the RCMP, and whichever other jurisdictions may apply. They're stealing. Right, flat out. We need justice, and this needs to stop. Something else I didn't touch on, and I meant to, was there was a Supreme Court ruling in 2003 where a judge in British Columbia Supreme Court ruled that chronic pain injuries are equal to all other workplace injuries. That's important for the video that's going to follow, but I'm not going to get into that now. What I have on the screen actually is a write-up by a workers' advocate in British Columbia about the case. You can actually look the case law up, but I find this is better because she summarized it. She quotes the judge. This is where the judge rules it to be unconstitutional, what they were doing. The Supreme Court of Canada has found this, that they have to apply the rules of the land, that WorkSafe tribunals and commission cannot just apply unfair policies and say it's their job to apply the rules. They have to apply the law of the land. They're not doing that here. We need to have that done, and we need justice, basically. Trying to talk to these people about this policy, I just get run around answers and nothing ever becomes of it. It's been over a year since I sent them my letter. I've talked to them probably half a dozen times in that year, the last time being a couple months ago, about this and about getting my money, and they just ignore me and tell me that there's an appeal process. Well, I contacted the Workers Advocate and I was told that the appeal board will look at the policy to see that it was followed, and they will deem that it was followed and nothing was done wrong, and your appeal will be denied. This is what I was told by the Workers Advocate. The Workers Advocate didn't even want to take my appeal, because they're the ones that do the appeals. Didn't even want to take my appeal because I didn't have one. Well, I do have one. I believe the appeal system is every bit as corrupt as the rest of WorkSafe, and I don't feel that I'm going to get justice from their appeal system at all. So what we need is the rule of law to take place here, and we need the police and the Crown prosecutors to go into WorkSafe New Brunswick and investigate the corruption that's going on. They're a Crown corporation. They're doing it in Her Majesty's name. I've given the letter to CBC, who's also a Crown corporation. They have no interest in having my story. About a week and a half after I talked to Steve Webb, their producer in St. John, I called him back, and he told me that he had given it to an assignment, his assignment team, and that they were in the process of giving it to a reporter, but everybody was busy and they didn't have time for my story. But if a slow news day came up, that they may call me, and then we meet and go from there. Well, that hasn't happened. They haven't done anything to want or pick up the story. Now, they are also a Crown corporation, so it's quite possible that they decided that they want to squash this because it makes the government look bad. This is the policy. It is illegal. We need justice. We're being stolen from, and there's mental anguish that's happening to injured workers in New Brunswick. It's not about me. I understand that I'm a victim of this as well, but it's about everybody, and it's about what they're doing to each of us, and what they're doing on a whole scale. They have to pay back all this money that they've stolen. This is what we need. We need them to pay back everybody that they've stolen from, and we need those people to be brought to justice before a criminal court. Those people responsible, right down to the case manager if need be. In conclusion, we as Canadian citizens have the right to be treated constitutionally under the law, not by a policy that was made up to suit the needs of a self-serving organization. As Canadians, we must stand up for what is right and just, rather than to allow ourselves to be bullied by a government entity like WorkSafe New Brunswick. I thank you very much for watching my video, and take care and be well.